law-abiding citizens. They go out to work, the kids go to school, they do all the right stuff, they pay their taxes, they're members, normal members of society. You see them in the supermarket, you see them at the school gate, but they are seeing their lives decimated, they're seeing their businesses destroyed, they're seeing their freedoms destroyed, and they are, they're ordinary people who are trying to have a say in a democracy which doesn't feel much like a democracy anymore.
Oh, you're so right. I mean, I interviewed people at the protest, and one of the big themes was I've never been to a protest before, but I'm so worried about democracy. And I can give you two personal examples of how I came up against this. One I was at in May, I bumped into a woman who I used to go to NCT with in Surrey. This could not be any more suburban. Yeah, antenatal classes. I can't tell you how much more yummy, mummy, Surrey, safe and suburban this could be. And I was like, oh, hello, what are you doing here? And at the first protest I went to, I was actually nearly arrested. I found myself surrounded by a group of policemen barking in my face that I had to go home or I'd be arrested. Now, at that point, I'm quite a long way from the protest. I'm at the back because, when you're reporting, when you're photographing, you don't want to be right in the middle. You want to be on the edge because you're watching it. And I get out my press card, hey, call it chaps. I didn't say that. I think I was a lot more timid. I'm a member of the press. And they didn't believe my press card was real. And it was actually a really intimidating situation. And unfortunately, on that protest in November, I saw many people at the back being arrested. I saw elderly women being thrown on the ground and handcuffed and surrounded by the police. And actually all they'd been doing was walking at the back of the protest, which was not illegal, as you point out. So it was a very heavy-handed approach. Didn't see that the last two protests. But to be honest, I think the numbers were so big they couldn't be dispersed.
But this is the interesting thing that we do see this. I mean, if there is any coverage at all, it will be a brief mention. It'll be on the BBC website or Sky, and it will be there have been X number of arrests. You never hear the numbers, and we know. I mean, some of the footage of these protests, it just shows the huge numbers. And if this is a march for Remain, we would have 24/7 coverage, wouldn't it? I've noticed Sky News in particular obsessed with the protests in Brazil. Bizarrely, loads and loads of people protesting, we're told, against there not being a lockdown by Bolsonaro, whilst walking along in close proximity with each other. All wearing masks, but it's quite bizarre. But protests in Brazil warrant a 10-minute report. A protest on London streets by British people against government policy, with tens and tens and tens, sometimes even hundreds of thousands of people, barely a mention.
I know, pre-pandemic, you couldn't have found anybody less cynical than me, but having been on 3 protests, it's changed my attitude a little bit towards the media, because I've seen that unless you see something with your own eyes, you can't trust the front page news, which has been an odd discovery. I've been quite bemused by it. I've seen that we live in a 2-tier media and police state, because the approach at different protests tells you a lot about the political barometer. And I think, I've been to protests where there was positive coverage of Christmas markets or people at Borough Market. Big crowds, people doing the same thing.
Yeah.
But somehow the virus apparently behaves differently in those crowds to protest. And I think what it leads me to cynically assume is that there's more fear of political contagion than viral contagion. I suspect this Saturday is going to be huge. They're calling it the big one. You might find some anti-vaxxers there, but mainly I think you'll find a lot of people who are worried about how long this has gone on for. Yeah. They're worried about COVID certification, and they're worried about the complete return their freedoms.
And that's the thing. I imagine there'll be a lot of people there who, like me, absolutely understood the need. And again, I now regret thinking this, but at the time thought the need for that lockdown, the 3 weeks to flatten the curve and things. But then trusted that within a few weeks, I didn't think it would be just 3, but that we'd be coming out. But certainly by May, I was going, well, hold on a minute, this isn't ever going to end. Even now, with this talk about June the 21st being scuppered, July the 19th. If you look at the data, it just doesn't make any sense. So we 19 people reported to have died yesterday. A very, very, very low death rate. We've already seen the peaking of this Indian variant in the places where it's been a hotspot, and we're not seeing hospitalisation. The number of people in hospitals has actually gone down this week, not up. That does not suggest to me that we are in a situation where we should be desperately still locking down. But there are so many people who just say, "What are you talking about? We're not in lockdown. Why would you be going on a protest against lockdown? We're not in lockdown. We're going to get all our freedoms back. It's going to be fine." But there are 2 issues there. Well, 2 or 3 actually. One is are we going to get all our freedoms back? Two is, are we going to have them taken away again in the autumn or winter when cases go up, as inevitably they will? I mean, it's the fact that actually we are still in lockdown. The government can tell me whether I can sing or not, whether I can go to a small sports day, how many people can be in a theatre or in an office. I mean, wearing masks, forced to wear face coverings during large parts of people's days. How do people not how many people I can have in my house, for goodness sake, or my back garden? How is that not a lockdown?
I know. Well, you won't want to get me started on that, but one thing that they're not telling you anymore, Julia, is that you shouldn't snog a non-cohabiting partner, right?
Yes, someone should tell the health secretary about that.
And that leads me to a point about the protest, because when you see our leaders or the elite people behave as if there's one rule for them and one rule for us, what that really shows you is they're not really terribly worried about the danger, because they understand the severity of risk and how infection happens. The protests themselves are in a way the best evidence for what they're fighting for. There have been no spikes in infections following protests and outdoor gatherings.
Yeah.
None. I think that most people who are at the protests would probably just want to say, give us back our God-given right to determine our own sense of risk and responsibility. Exactly. And the protests themselves don't lead to infections, which is what some quite smug commentators said at early protests. Oh, look at the COVIDians, they're going to cause infections to go. Well, they didn't.
No, indeed. Small things like facts, they'll catch on one day. Laura Dodsworth, author of A State of Fear, has been on 3 of those protest marches, big protest march from lunchtime in London, central London tomorrow.
What's going on, coaches?